So welcome to the One Big Question on the Modern Software Engineering channel. Today, I've got a guest with me, Manuel Pais. Say hi, Manuel.
Hi, everyone.
And we're going to be answering the question, what's the true cost of cognitive load on software engineering teams? So getting straight into it, where do we think that cost is? I would argue that that's pretty much the whole game of software development. Software development is difficult. And so managing that difficulty and complexity is the whole game. And that's true on a number of fronts. There's naturally the complexity of the problem that we're trying to solve, but there's also the complexity of trying to have a whole bunch of people involved in solving it. You think that's a reasonable summary, Manuel?
Yeah, absolutely agree. That's a big part of the difficulty of the work in software engineering, right? What's also interesting is that we, since the book Team Topologies came out in 2019, and we sort of introduced the idea of team cognitive load, that there is this load on the team that teams are often having some difficulty to get, work done, understand the complexity of what they need to do. And since the book came out, we actually have done our own research with the help of someone who has a PhD in this area, Dr. Laura Weiss. And what we were able to discover is that there are multiple drivers of cognitive load in teams. And one of them, or some of them, are definitely related to the complexity of the work itself, right? How much information you need to know, both from the technical side and the business side. And, ideally, you have a customer focus, so you also understand what are the customers trying to do, how do we solve their problems. So it's a lot of factors that you have to bring in, and that makes the work complex. And maybe that's something that, to some extent, we cannot reduce too much. But at the same time, sort of in parallel, there are many other areas that are influencing the cognitive load on teams. So we actually identified there are four kind of clusters or four areas, which include the composition of the team actually has a strong impact. Do you have, obviously the right skill set, but is the team too big or too small? Is there clarity in the roles? Do people work well together? As you were saying initially, like how we work together is such a big part of our effectiveness. And then there's another area which is more around the complexity of the work itself and the clarity of the goals for the team and how we measure success and all these things. And then there's an area about kind of the environment where we work. So do we have obviously the right tools in software engineering? Are the workflows well integrated and all this? But also the actual environment where we work, whether that's in office, at home. If it's too noisy, then we're not going to be able to concentrate. So there are all these different areas that have different drivers of cognitive load. And even if the complexity at the core, the complexity of what we're doing sometimes cannot be minimized, we can work on a lot of those other factors. And in fact, a lot of people who go through the survey that we have for teams, so we built this tool that's freely available called Temperature, where teams self-diagnose through a survey, and people find it very insightful that they start to realize, oh yes, having to manage dependencies on, 5 other teams and getting approvals from 3 other people is increasing our cognitive load, and it's not providing direct value. So that's something we should try to minimize, or that we don't have the right work environment. That's something that should be looked at. So I think I agree with you. At the core, it's complex work, but then there's all these other factors that we should look to minimize.
So the other things add to the complexity of our work. That makes absolute sense to me. And a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, so I would characterize Team Topologies as really a modeling approach to helping us to manage that cognitive load more effectively. So that we can build software in larger groups of people if we need to, but split up in ways so that we can have these smaller, more autonomous teams that all of the research says is the most efficient way of making progress. As a software developer, I think of this as an information problem. This is really about abstraction and coupling between teams. This is about drawing boundaries between teams so that I can work on my stuff without impacting on you too much and without knowing too much detail, reducing my cognitive load in terms of not needing to understand every last thing that you're doing, but we can make progress in parallel with each other that enhances the system as a whole. Team Topologies is a lot about organizing to achieve that kind of thing. And so techniques like abstraction and managing coupling are key.
For sure. I mean, Team Topologies essentially is about how we organize not just teams, but even the business for fast flow.
Yeah.
And a key decision criteria is how do we minimize / control cognitive load so that teams can be effective, right? So one of the starting points is, as you're saying, like, can we identify what are, the value streams that make sense for the business? How does this break down to the level usually of a service or a small application that one team can be responsible for, a smallish team, as you're saying, because we know that's more effective. So it starts there. And it absolutely, we were inspired by your work as well with continuous delivery and the work of many other people on how do we abstract, how we get to, loose coupling between teams. It's not that there's no dependency, because sometimes people, they think, well, teams work totally in isolation. No, but you are fairly autonomous to deliver value on your service or your stream. And sometimes you need, touch point, because the interfaces, like the technical systems, the interfaces also between teams are going to change. Now we need to, maybe next week we need to collaborate a bit more, and then we're going to work off more independently. And in 3 months, we need to work out again how our services work together because there's some new functionality. But we are more intentional about designing the teams and the responsibilities so they also, from cognitive load perspective, are manageable and sensible for teams to have that kind of autonomy and being effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, we look at we introduced other patterns, not that they're totally new patterns, obviously based in what already existed before, but for example, the platform pattern, the internal platforms as a product. The main difference when we're talking about it from team topologies or organizational perspective is they should be reducing cognitive load on your product teams or stream-aligned teams.
Yeah.
So it's not that fundamentally they're different types of platforms, and technically it's sort of, we should be using the same principles of and the same good tooling and so on, but we're actually focusing primarily on, are we helping the teams that use the platform have less on their plate, because we're offering them good ways, or we usually called golden paths to get things done in an effective way.
Yeah. So that idea is key, of being able to focus on the value that one team is bringing and make progress as independently as is sensible. Not
exactly.
It isn't a purity test, but making it progress in sensible ways with the minimum amount of work and dependence on other teams that is sensible, is a good way of thinking about and organizing things. This episode is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant helps you to become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of visual interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and artificial intelligence. I love learning new things, and I've been a Brilliant subscriber for some time now, before they started advertising on this channel. I use it to indulge my love of maths, physics, and science in general. In addition to all of these, Brilliant also has lots of courses on programming and AI. I've particularly enjoyed courses on scientific thinking, geometric thinking, digital circuits, and I'm currently working on quantum computing. Brilliant is a more effective way to learn because it allows you to learn by interacting with the topics that you're studying. It makes learning a much more engaging, and I think builds a more intuitive understanding of the subjects that you're studying. I use Brilliant for a few minutes each day, completing a few lessons at a time on my phone or computer. So if you're interested in using Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/modern software engineering, or scan the QR code on screen or link in the description. And Brilliant is offering viewers of the Modern Software Engineering channel 20% off annual premium subscriptions, which gives you unlimited access to everything that they have. Thanks, Brilliant, for sponsoring this episode. Manuel, back to our conversation. So I think that the other part of the question is what's the cost? So if we get this wrong, how does this impact on teams? I suppose that's something that we should talk about too.
Yeah, I mean, I see it almost like a kind of expectations management problem, right? When we're not aware of what are the actual drivers of cognitive load in teams, we're usually looking at the effects, at the symptoms, which are, even relating to the DORA metrics, right? You're probably going to see the team is slower to deliver
Yeah.
to the customers. They might have more issues with their service or system, more incidents and downtime because the cognitive load is very high. But then one thing I've noticed since Team Topologies was published, it's really good that people introduced and have this vocabulary to talk about these problems. But sometimes we're still talking about team cognitive load as a kind of a black box, right? There's this cloud of cognitive load on the team, but why is that exactly, right? And if we can go a bit deeper into understanding, as we were saying before, is this just the complexity of the work itself? Well, probably not. Maybe the composition of the team or the dependencies or how even the processes that we follow, how the work comes into the team, etc. All these things might have a strong impact. And then we're often seeing, and I talk to many organizations where understandably they're focusing on the productivity metrics.
Yeah.
But often those metrics are, at the tail end of something that was impacted way before by all these, cognitive load aspects to a large extent. So the cost is really, if you think in terms of DORA metrics, for example, is that teams will be on the lower end of those, key metrics, and they won't be elite performers. They will be medium or poor performers. I remember, I don't remember exactly which year, but a couple of years ago, one of the State of DevOps reports saw that in terms of those metrics, kind of how organizations were doing compared to, the beginnings of DevOps. Yes, a lot of organizations had gone from low performers to medium performers, but there was very little increase from medium to high performers. And part of the reason is because they didn't put in still the effort to understand where's this cognitive load coming from. How does the way we organize, the way we work together impact those metrics, right?
Yeah. I think one of the things that you said when we were talking about this before we started recording that resonated strongly with me is that this is not just about trying to reduce cognitive load to nothing. This is about managing it appropriately.
Yes.
It's trying to get the correct level of cognitive load. I agree with you. I've worked on some high-performing teams on some complex things, and we were kind of proud of that our problem was hard, and we enjoyed that it was hard, and that motivated us. So it's not about not needing to think hard about things, but it's trying to minimize it and manage it to an appropriate level so that we can concentrate on the stuff that requires our attention.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I've seen my share of kind of as you're saying before, purity test on cognitive load. Like, no, I even going to the extreme of, saying, oh no, we cannot learn something new because that's going to increase our cognitive load. But that is not really the point. The point is finding a good balance. Do we need to learn these new skills? And, today we could be talking about, artificial intelligence, for example. Do we need to learn these new skills to be more effective? Okay, that's going to temporarily increase our cognitive load, because we want to be able to get to better results and faster results, etc. So we manage that expectation. We are taking on this extra load so that afterwards we can increase our metrics and in a way reduce the cost of that cognitive load. So it's kind of like an investment. And besides that, there are many situations where the reality kicks in and has a strong impact on teams, and we're not even aware sometimes. So if we're doing a reorg, of course you're going to increase cognitive load if people are changing roles, if they have to learn new processes, or even learning the new organization, if you are changing responsibilities of teams, or they have to start working on some new service. Of course, the cognitive load is going to go up. And so sometimes we kind of this reality in the context of the organization that's taking place is kind of seen as, independent things, but they're not. All these things are impacting the team. And that's why it's important from my perspective to have a kind of deeper understanding of where is cognitive load coming from, because it's not just the complexity of what we're trying to do, is everything else, how we're organized, how responsibilities are assigned, and all that. So definitely it's a bit too simplistic to see this as, oh, we're always trying to reduce cognitive load. No, sometimes we're increasing for good reasons.
Yeah.
And we look at how can we minimize other things that maybe we should not have to worry as much about, right?
Yeah. So I suppose that makes sense. And as we said, it's about managing it sensibly rather than minimizing it. So I misspoke a few times, I guess. The other part of the cost. So there's the cost to an organization of managing the cognitive load effectively, but there's also the cost to the individuals. Do you have any information on whether cognitive load has an impact on burnout in people and so on? My impression is that if you get too extreme, it does. It wears people down. What's your experience?
Yes, I mean, on one hand, we know that in our industry, the levels of burnout and anxiety are extremely high. And we've seen evidence that suggests there's a strong correlation between high cognitive load and those situations of burnout, stress, etc. We've implemented, as I was saying before, we did this research about to come up with a team cognitive load model that actually looks at 4 different clusters and about 25 different specific drivers of cognitive load in teams. So that's available on temperature.com if you're interested. And we see this kind of correlation when we talk to the organizations and teams and individuals. And sometimes people think it's just the way it has to be, but it actually, when you look in more depth, you see that no, we could actually improve a lot of these things. And on the other hand, now that Team Topologies has been around for 6 years, and we actually just launched the 2nd edition of the book with 10 new case studies. One thing which for me is very rewarding is to see that in all the cases, people feel more motivated after the changes, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the work from Daniel Pink, for example, on intrinsic motivators, it makes all the sense because, besides the, financial stability and all that, people want to feel like they have autonomy to make good decisions, that they have mastery, that they're improving their craft, and that they have a sense of purpose, right? So if we're looking at how can we take cognitive load into consideration to help organize teams in a way that they're more focused, they have less dependencies, they're not blocked as much, and they can actually make good decisions and deliver value, then it makes all the sense that teams and individuals are going to feel more motivated and less burnout as they adopt some of these ideas.
So, are there ways in which we can manage cognitive load with other things? So, do we know whether AI increases or reduces cognitive load on teams?
Yes, obviously, artificial intelligence has a big role, and it's increasing the role in software engineering teams. I believe we're starting to see, after the initial hype, we're starting to realize that, or people who are more into the work of software engineering teams actually start to realize that obviously there are some gains by using AI technology, but there are many other factors that we need to be looking at. How does this impact not just productivity per se in terms of how quickly I can get something done? Does this help teams in their workflow? Are things well integrated? Or because if we're now jumping and kind of context switching between our delivery and our deployment pipelines and our tool set, and now we have to jump into a totally different kind of tool set for AI and figure out how do we then get this into the deployment pipeline to go to production or what have you, that might be actually increasing cognitive load in teams and making them less productive, at least temporarily. And then also even at the kind of more human level, thus using this new technology, are people feeling like they're less valued? How does this impact their perception of the value as a human if we don't pay attention to that and be careful about being clear about what does AI help us with and what do we need to have human intervention? And I believe those are all kind of very important questions to ask. It is clear that AI can help, but it can also, increase complexity, and it can also create some fatigue as well in people. So we're actually launching a survey to measure and assess what are the key factors of team cognitive load in the industry. And one part of that survey specifically about artificial intelligence, to get a pulse of how much is actually helping versus how much it might be impacting negatively. And again, is setting the expectations that it's not a magic wand that now we can do everything 10 times faster. We can do some things faster, but it might also have impact if we're disturbing kind of our workflows, the way we work, if people are then becoming more individualized and working less as a team and actually each person doing their little bit with AI, that's probably not going to be as helpful for the end result, where you still need to have something consistent that you're providing to your customers. So this survey, if people are interested to help and fill in, is available on temperature.com/survey.
We'll put a link to that in the description below. I think we're probably at time. I'd like to try and summarize what we've talked about so that we can answer the question. So what is the true cost of cognitive load on software engineering teams? If you'll forgive me, I'm going to put words in your mouth to try and summarize it. If you disagree, just say,
No problem.
and maybe we'll come back and record another one. But go, how would you summarize it?
I would just say we would be good to summarize the cost and then what can we do about it, right?
Yeah.
And the cost is that if cognitive load is high and we don't have a clear picture of why is it high impacting the team, we're going to see those productivity metrics that most organizations look at are going to be impacted, and probably customer satisfaction is going to be impacted and business satisfaction. So that is the cost that we know. It's going to take longer. It's going to be more risky. We might have more difficulty to recover from problems and all those things that DORA metrics tell us about.
Forgive me interrupting, but I'm pleased then that I'm not putting words in your mouth, because I was going to summarize the same thing. It means that we end up building worse software slower.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put it. And our customers won't be happy about it.
Yeah. And we're at risk, we're at greater risk of burnout if we're working in these more stressful organizations.
Absolutely.
So Manuel, you're about to release some training stuff on our site. Could you tell us a little about that and what that's going to be doing for people and helping people to understand?
Yes, I'm really excited about that, having followed your work for so long. So this short course is about team-centric CI/CD platforms. So it has a lot to do with what we've been discussing in terms of cognitive load, which is obviously we need all this good tooling for CI/CD, but when we're providing this as a platform or service to other teams, we need to be focused on, are we actually helping them do things and have their pipelines and deliver their work in a simpler way or not? And so that has to do a lot also with the boundaries of responsibility between what should be in the CI/CD platform's responsibility and what should be in the responsibility of the product or streamlined teams, right? So it's a lot about that. It's also a bit about building trust between the platform and the product teams. Without that trust, then you might have the best tools, but it's still not going to be effective.
That's great. Thank you very much. And there's a link to that free course in the description below. So that sounds like a good place to stop in terms of our answer. Thank you for being a guest on the One Big Question, Manuel. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
And if you've got this far watching us, thank you very much. Do check out our links below and hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and like the video so that it will get seen by more people. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.